Should Austin taxpayers really be asked to cover the city's $33 million deficit? Has APD gotten any better at responding to protests? And what did the city win and lose at the Texas legislature? Today on CityCast Austin, we sit down with Mayor Pro Tem Vanessa Fuentes to find out. It's Tuesday, June 24th. I'm Eva Ruth Moravec, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here with Mayor Pro Tem Vanessa Fuentes. Thank you so much for having us down at City Hall today.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to get right into it. We just came off of a slew of big protests here in Austin. And, this started with the anti-ICE protests that we saw in Los Angeles and then spread around the country. Governor Greg Abbott, after the first round, said that he was calling in the Texas National Guard and they were going to be on call. And I saw that you posted, that sending the National Guard to intimidate peaceful protesters is wrong, period.
Mm-hmm.
And then you spoke at the No Kings protest. And so there were thousands of people there. It was very lively. Do you think people were intimidated by this threat of the National Guard being on call?
I was so thrilled to see thousands of Austinites and Texans gathered at our state's capital. To me, it was a powerful response and solidarity with one another, but also just kind of a really big FU to Greg Abbott, who announced days in advance that he was sending in the military guard, which obviously is not about public safety. It's not about keeping our community safe when you're sending troops in beforehand. And it is military intimidation. Do I think it had an effect? Yes, I do think some people stayed away. Just hours before we started the No Kings rally, we had a death threat come in to Democratic lawmakers. So they actually shut down the Capitol for a few hours. And just hours before, we learned about the killing of a state senator in Minnesota and her spouse. And, I think that there was a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions going on Saturday. But to me personally, it felt really good to be there with thousands of Austinites to recognize the moment that we're in as a country and to more so not normalize the actions that we're seeing coming out of the federal administration and to really come together and denounce the actions.
And the actions are still going to happen, so what do you think the protests, what message did they send? Like, what's the takeaway if you're a lawmaker or?
What I am thinking through is how can we ensure that our people are safe in practicing their fundamental constitutional right to protest? And so ensuring that Austinites have the ability to protest, that they feel safe in doing so. They're not going to be met with military intimidation or be met with excessive use of police force. That's number one. So we are working on a policy to affirm our rights as residents and to also call for the humane treatment of our immigrant community. So very much looking forward to that and working with a community group on it and hope to bring that forward to City Council in the coming weeks. Now, what I'm seeing take place, even why mass movements matter. And there was a really good podcast episode for Pod Save America, and they had a guest on who talked about 3.5% is kind of like that tipping point when you see change happen, when you see actual policy change and actions as a result of protests. And so if we can continue as Americans to have these protests across our country to show that we will not stand for these actions. We will not stand for the separation of our families, the disappearance of our neighbors, of our loved ones with no accountability, with no due process, then I believe and I'm confident that we will see change.
The last time that we saw a lot of protests here was during the Black Lives Matter movement. And, there was a lot of tension between the public and the police.
That's right.
I'm curious about how you see that relationship between protesters and APD now, if there's any difference to what we saw back with BLM.
Oh, there's a huge difference. I mean, just knowing, so actually that I was very concerned about there not being the changes necessary that came out of the BLM protests and really the summer of racial reckoning that we had in 2020. I took office right after that and have now been on council to the point where I have voted on over $20 million worth of victim settlements. These are individuals who were disfigured and irreparably harmed and physically changed as a result of, having beanbag rounds thrown at them from police officers and indiscriminately. And so a couple of days before the No Kings rally, I, certainly reached out to our police chief here in Austin, who is, I guess, still pretty new, right? She came in at the end of fall of last year. And she assured me that the Austin Police Department has made a number of changes, both in trainings, both in de-escalation. They don't use beanbag rounds anymore. They don't use a number of, what would you call them?
Less lethal.
Yes, less lethal. Yes. I mean, they have a whole list of things as a result of the Council 2020. They quickly, took action and passed policy to change how police responded. And I think, we got to see, that progress demonstrated. It was a relatively peaceful weekend, and there were a few incidents, to be clear, but overall, there was not anywhere near the situation we had in 2020.
And any insight into if you think more protests are coming our way?
Oh, yes. President Trump has made it very clear that he has a deportation number that he wants to hit. And now he's targeting Democratic-run cities. And so I do anticipate and expect for there continue to be ICE raids. And I believe that the administration will continue to escalate and take actions in ways that aren't reflective of our American values. And so we should stand ready to protest.
Has he said anything specifically or has Austin heard anything specifically like this is coming our way, or we're just expecting?
Yeah, not yet. But, being the capital city, I'm under no illusion that we don't have a target on our backs. And we have a number of state lawmakers who live in our city. And so certainly they're in our backyard. And we know that we are under a microscope.
All the time. So speaking of that, we just wrapped up the Texas legislative session, and Mayor Kirk Watson said that Austin fared pretty well. How did you feel like it played out this year?
Well, relatively speaking, as Austinites, there were a number of bad bills that we defeated. One particular lawmaker has filed this creating the District of Austin. So basically taking away our local authority and putting us, the city of Austin, under the state legislature. And that bill got a hearing, which we were kind of like, well, that's odd. We can't really believe that anyone is seriously considering this. But that legislation was voted on and went down unanimously, which is just really poetic to see and to have happen. And it really was a strong message to our local authority that we have as a home rule city.
Yeah, to even take a vote on something that they knew was they could have just not voted.
Right.
And it would be dead. But
yeah. So it was just like
symbolic.
It was very good. I loved that one. And then we defeated, there were a number of anti-Project Connect bills. That is our new transformative integrated transit system that has a number of enhancements for our transit network. But we have state lawmakers who are hell-bent on derailing Project Connect, and those bills were defeated. So overall, we fared relatively well. Now, there was one piece of legislation that was really important to me. It was an item I brought forward on council that sought to establish the Reproductive Logistical Fund, helping Austinites seek and obtain reproductive health care abortions out of state. We live in a state with one of the strictest abortion bans in the country. And so we set up this fund to help our people who need access to health care. And state lawmakers targeted us in the city of San Antonio, and that now has been preempted. And so we'll have to figure out what we can do as a city that's in compliance with state law. But that was really disheartening to see.
Republicans continue to, try to chip away at any access to abortion. So it's not like that was that surprising. It kind of felt like as soon as that ordinance passed at Austin City Hall, y'all knew that was coming, right?
Yes, we knew that we would be targeted. But, I think that's the important thing as a lawmaker is you take risks and you still stand up for your people despite everyone that tells you it's not going to work out and it's going to get defeated in the end. Well, because we stood up that fund, we actually have helped Austinites and we ensure that they got the health care they needed. And for the time that we were able to do that, that's a good thing. And that's how local government is supposed to work.
What was the defense to, lawmakers who wanted to take that right away, who would say like, this isn't something that taxpayers should pay for. Not everybody agrees with abortion. Not everybody thinks that you should have access to it. If I'm a taxpayer, why should I support that?
Well, for me, it's just like, come on, this is about basic human rights. This is about the right to privacy. This is an individual choice is not for anyone else to judge or to interfere. So regardless of whether or not you personally or religiously agree on the issue of abortion care, it should not dictate, especially when you have democratically elected representatives who want to stand up this service, that your personal belief should not preempt the service to another.
And that fund is it dead now? Or what's the status?
Well, we have a little bit of time before the law goes into effect. And so those are conversations that I'm having with our city administration to see how we will have to revamp the program to ensure that's in compliance. But there are ways that we can still ensure that we're helping Austinites.
And can you say how many Austinites have been, like, how do you calculate how much that money has helped, or, who it's gone to, where they've gone, that kind of thing?
Well, the important part with establishing the fund is that we work with a local nonprofit and they administer the fund and they provide the resources and services. And I know that we have helped more than 15 Austinites in the time that we were able to get the fund out, how quickly we were able to get out. And thank you to city staff for ensuring that we were able to do that.
And with the attack on Project Connect, that being brought by Representative Ellen Troxclair, who was formerly on Austin City Council. Did
Yes.
that feel like more personal? What was that fight like for y'all?
Well, she has brought forward anti-Project Connect bills a number of sessions now. And so she certainly has been on a mission to undo this democratically held election. Austinites, an overwhelming amount of Austinites voted in support of our new transit system. And, she keeps trying to make the case of why the state legislature should undo it, but she hasn't been successful. And to me, what I take away from that is that we have a legislative process and then we have an electoral process. And if we have representatives who are not honoring the wishes of the people that we represent, then we should exercise our right. And I hope everyone continues to vote and to be informed of how your lawmakers are voting and what their policy agendas are.
Okay, and a quick note for y'all listeners here. We asked Representative Troxclair if she wanted to respond and explain her bill, and her office emailed back a statement accusing council of duping taxpayers into approving an eternal 20% property tax hike for a rail system. The statement read in part, quote, ensuring that infrastructure is financed by a transparent and traditional bond approval process is a bridge too far for those elected officials who love a blank check, and their financing shell game, even if voter approved, is not legal or democratic. Okay, back to the interview. She and then Mackenzie Kelly both represented a more conservative view on Austin City Council. It doesn't seem like there is a, person who kind of fits in that role right now. Do you think that that's missing on the dais?
Well, I would say even though this council of 2025, we all affiliate as Democrats, there is a spectrum in that. Just, Democratic Party is a big tent party. So there's a lot of us with varying views on the issues. So there's still differences amongst us. I have colleagues who are more conservative on financial policies, and then there are others who are, more socially liberal. And so I think ultimately, we're all, as local policymakers, we're committed to improving city services for the people. And I haven't seen any type of disadvantage from not having a conservative voice at the table.
Do you feel like y'all get that perspective from like public comments or from groups that are closely working with y'all?
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, the issues we're deliberating, are about parks and street maintenance and getting sidewalks completed. And so the partisanship doesn't really play into how we deliberate or how we approach solving problems. If anything, I have helped a number of individuals who have proactively told me how they affiliate, but it doesn't change the level of service.
Right. Yeah. Not a lot of like politics on the local level here. And one last thing back to the ledge. Mayor Watson told us he thought that his role as mayor and his experience in the Senate would be beneficial to helping Austin like push forward their legislative agenda or defend the bad stuff from coming in. Do you think that was what happened this year, or what do you think was attributable for the success that y'all had
at the state legislature? Oh my gosh. Well, yes, most certainly. The fact that he is a former state lawmaker is helpful. He certainly has a ton of relationships and experience. The great thing about our city council and fun fact is that many of us have served and worked in the Capitol.
That's right.
I'm a former legislative staff aide, Councilmember Ryan Alter, Chito Vela,
right,
who was the chief of staff when my husband was the intern in their office. So that was a really neat connection that we had with Councilmember Vela. And then who else? I think Councilmember Kadri. Yes. Mm-hmm. So we were all engaging during the legislative session. I mean, I know personally, I went up to the Capitol a number of times and met with lawmakers on the issues. We all care very deeply about our city. All of us bring kind of a skill set and relations, and we would hope that for any leader of the city that they're able to really flex those relations.
I did have one more question about the legislature. Short-term rental laws. So there was some stuff that, bills that were proposed that would have changed potentially Austin's STR regulations, and they didn't get passed. So do you know where we are with STR? Has everything already been passed, or is there still something that needs to be approved to start like really having them register and collect all the tax revenue?
So we have started collecting hotel tax dollars from short-term rentals. And yes, and that was a big piece. And I'm really pleased that we were able to take action on that end. But our approach to short-term rentals, we had to split it up since we wanted to see how the state legislature intervened or what kind of regulations they added into how we can approach short-term rentals operating in our city. So we will now pick up the conversation again come this fall. But know that there were a number of changes that we were able to implement, namely being the collection of the hotel occupancy tax dollars. Why that's important is because a portion of that goes into ensuring not only the enforcement of STRs, but also goes back to cultural arts, music, and historic preservation projects. And so that's some really much needed revenue source for us on that end. And so I would say now the other part of how we're able to regulate STRs will happen later this fall. And I really hope to see us make some significant headway on it.
So we'll see that play out in the budget, right? We'll suddenly see more hot money going into these funds.
Not a lot, though, because it only took effect April 1st. So we won't see too much new revenue.
We didn't get South by. Yeah. But we'll get ACL.
There you go.
What do former President Lyndon B. Johnson and the movie Jaws, yes, that Jaws, have in common? A new exhibit at the LBJ Presidential Library. Before he wrote Jaws, Peter Benchley was President Johnson's speechwriter, and this temporary exhibit is all about Benchley's journey from the White House to best-selling novelist to ocean conservationist. Talk about a fascinating career. Don't miss this chance to learn all about Benchley and Johnson's environmental legacy, how Jaws changed our understanding of sharks, and much more. From the White House to the deep ocean, LBJ, Jaws, and Conservation will be at the LBJ Presidential Library from now through October 19th. Find out more about the exhibit at lbjlibrary.info/Jaws. It's summertime, y'all, so that means it's time to change out our warm, thick bedding for cooler, lighter bedding that can stand up to those Austin summer nights. Cozy Earth bamboo sheets do just that. These sheets are temperature regulating and they naturally wick away heat and moisture from your body, helping you sleep several degrees cooler. And since my partner emits body heat that can be compared to the surface of the sun, I need sheets that will cool me down. And the best part, it is risk-free. They have a 100-night sleep trial so you can try them out when the city is at its hottest. And if you don't like them, you can return them hassle-free. But something tells me you won't want to. Plus, they offer a 10-year warranty on all bedding products. That is a decade of cool quality sleep. And just in case all of that isn't enough, they come in the cutest little canvas storage bag. So upgrade your summer, go to CozyEarth.com and use code CozyAustin for 40% off best-selling temperature-regulating sheets, apparel, and more. Trust me, you'll feel the difference the very first night.
We are heading into budget season, and the city is facing a $33 million deficit. What are you expecting as Mayor Pro Tem to be the biggest kind of arguments and friction points as y'all head into this next couple months?
Well, we certainly are in a new financial outlook as a city. The first that I've had experience as a council member these last 4 years, and really as a result of a state-imposed tax revenue cap. You know, they have now, well, first of all, they severely limit our financial tools and put so much onus on property tax collections. And unfortunately, you know, it makes it harder and harder for cities to be able to provide high quality, reliable, consistent city services if you only have a certain number of financial tools available. So we are just now feeling the effects of having that revenue cap, but also acknowledging that our sales tax revenue is much lower than projected. And we are not the only city dealing with that.
Would have thought people would stop spending money.
Right. With, you know, looming tariffs happening and inflation. So we are in a $33 million deficit for our budget. So we're not alone. San Antonio has, I think for their next fiscal year, they're having over $100 million deficit for their city. Dallas has a smaller budget deficit. And so you're going to see many more cities having to contend with doing a tax rate election. And what that means is going out to the voters to say, if you would like for us to maintain, to stabilize city services, or even to grow the way that we're able to do maintenance in our parks, or pay our city workers more, or our firefighters and paramedics who are up for contract negotiations, we are going to have to make that case to Austinites to consider. Now, what makes the situation even more dire is that we have federal funding cuts. So our Austin Public Health Department faced $15 million shortfall, and we lost a $50 million grant from FEMA on disaster preparedness and infrastructure hardening, and a $1 million grant that would help with our electric grid upgrades. And that's just a few of the things that have happened in the last few months.
Right. So am I hearing you right that we are going to see a tax rate increase election?
Well, that is to be determined. And certainly what was important to us on council, and I'm a member of our Audit and Finance Committee, is that we at least set up a policy framework for us to be thoughtful in that consideration. That is a big ask, and it's one that we don't make very often. In fact, the last time we made it here in the city of Austin, where we had a tax rate election, was in 2020. So it's been now 5 years. And if we know that we have a budget shortfall for this fiscal year that's coming up, and we know we're going to have an even greater budget deficit by 2027 and 2029, we have a structural deficit. And for us to fully address it, we have to consider things like a tax rate election. But have we made the final call? Not yet. And that's why it's so important for people to be engaged and to follow the budget process, because we want people to know what's at stake and what's being considered.
And $33 million is a lot of money. Like, I know that just the small change of like getting rid of night swimming at Barton Springs. There was such a public outcry about that council had to say, well, actually, never mind.
The city manager quickly made that decision.
So, it doesn't seem like we will take to these changes very well. Would you need cuts on top of the tax rate?
If we don't want to lose services, if we don't want to change the programs and the way we're able to meet the needs of our community, then we will have to seek voter approval for us to have a tax rate election. And should that be approved, then we may not have to do any cuts in services, any layoffs, anything of that sort. So the manager is going to present his base budget proposal on July 12th. And that'll be the first time that we get to see, okay, because he's going to present a balanced budget and it's going to have cuts. And so how do you find $33 million? I think people are going to be upset. I think people are going to realize very quickly what's at stake and why we need to seriously consider a tax rate election, and how we can come together to address our overall needs. And it's a confluence of factors that are happening because, I talked about our own budget deficit. We have organizations who've been impacted by federal funding cuts. So we have a financial gap in our community from all of the chaos and confusion happening at the federal level that will have a real impact on meals for seniors, on education for our kids, on programs and services. The other piece that is still kind of hanging over our heads here is we have the ending of the American Rescue Plan Act federal relief dollars. These are dollars that have gone to housing, that have gone towards addressing homelessness, that have gone to a number of really important projects, Del Valley Food Co-op being one of them. And those dollars are coming to an end. So there are a number of services that we've been funding for the last few years that will now also have funding gaps that we have to think through, how can we fill that gap?
I know our approach to homelessness has gotten really expensive, having a whole unit and having so much interaction with people who are experiencing homelessness and trying to get them into the right places, the court also. Mm-hmm. Do you think that approach will have to change?
Oh, yes. If we do not identify new revenue sources, then we will have a very unstable homelessness response system. And we've worked really hard to fund solutions that we know are effective. The issue is that we haven't been able to scale those solutions because we haven't had the necessary funding. Now, we've done a number of strategies here in the last few months that I have been really excited about and pleased to see progress. And that includes, working with vendors who will now identify where do we have vacant apartments available so that we can quickly connect someone who is about to fall into homelessness, at risk of falling into homelessness, or just recently homeless, quickly get them into an apartment home so that they're stabilized. Once someone falls into homelessness, it is so much more costly to provide them with the services and care and treatments that they need. So it really is important how we provide those interventions. The thing that's kind of guiding all of this is that we had a report was done by ECHO, which is our homelessness continuum of care provider. They did an analysis of the amount of individuals living unhoused in our city. And they put out a report of, how much it would, or really of just like how big the issue and the problem is that we have in Austin. And then based on that report, our homelessness strategy office then provided recommendations on, okay, we have this assessment, we have the numbers, how much would it take for us to adequately and sufficiently address homelessness? And it was over 100 million needed. Oh my gosh. Big surprise there. Our council has declared addressing homelessness as one of our top budget priorities. So I hope and intend to see a lot of focus on it come budget season.
So September is when council's presented with the budget. And
July 12th.
July 12th. Presented with the budget July 12th. Vote on it in mid-August. Mm-hmm. And so I guess at that point, we'll know whether we're asking for a tax rate election also.
That's right.
So the budget gets passed expecting voters will approve that?
That's right. It gets passed at the amount of the rate that we believe we need to sufficiently provide quality city services. Then it goes to the voter so that they know what they're voting on. They're going to know we approved this budget and it sets out all of these services and at what funding levels. And then if the voters say, no, too much, then we reconvene as a council and we adopt a budget at a rate that either doesn't require voter approval. So then that would be a very
small increase.
No, I mean, yeah, it could only go up to 3.5%. It is a $5 billion budget, and that's not just the general fund. That includes all of our enterprises. So the airport, the convention center, Austin Energy, Austin Water.
Ugh. Sounds like a pain in the ass. I'm sorry. It's just a lot. But I guess we're looking forward to some angry citizens for the next few months.
We have a very engaged citizenry here in Austin.
That's what I meant.
Okay, y'all, a little slice of Broadway heaven is coming to Zach Theater, and I gotta say, this show is one of my favorites. Run, do not walk to get your tickets for Waitress. It's a hit musical about second chances and the courage to start over. It's inspired by Adrienne Shelley's film and features music by powerhouse Sarah Bareilles. This story follows Jenna, a small-town waitress and pie maker extraordinaire, as she mixes heartbreak, hope, and humor into her own recipe for a fresh start. It's all about finding joy in unexpected places. Doesn't that sound good right now? It's warm, witty, and filled with heart. Seriously, y'all, it's so good. You got to see it. So don't miss this feel-good Broadway favorite that's as sweet as pie. Waitress is on stage now. Tickets at zachtheater.org. That's ZACH theater.org.
So, Mayor Pro Tem is a very full-time job, and you're also the District 2 council person.
Yes.
So tell us what your favorite hidden gems are in District 2. If you were to recommend, restaurants, bars, shops, anything come to mind?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, fun fact, our district is home of the state park, McKinney Falls State Park. We're the only district to have a state park.
Ooh.
So I always highly recommend going out on a hike at McKinney Falls or swim. Both are great, especially in the summer. What I love most about my district is that we have some really good taquerias. And, even before I was in an office, I had a whole segment called Taco Truck Talks on Tuesdays. And so I can give you a long list of recommendations of taquerias to check out too.
Do you think that y'all have the best taqueries in the city?
Here's the thing. Those are fighting words. District 4 will come at me if I start. But yes, I do. I do.
Right.
But Austin Chronicle actually just did this great write-up on pan dulce, on panaderias. And I was really pleased to have 2 District 2 spots make the list. That's La Reina off of East William Cannon and Mi Tradicion off of East William Cannon, also William Cannon. And so if you're into pan dulce, there's some really good conchas available. Check out those 2.
Awesome. What do you enjoy doing to kind of clear your mind in Austin and touch grass?
Well, here's the thing. One of my New Year's resolutions was to do 25 hikes in 2025.
Oh.
So I have been
McKinney Falls 25 times.
I know. I wish I might have to get to that. But because I've done, we're in June and I've done 8 so far.
Nice.
And they've been all over the city from St. Edwards, which is not a St. Edwards University. This is a St. Edwards Greenbelt in Northwest Austin.
Very confusing.
I know. Yes, I have to clarify because I did trick a couple of my friends into going to it and they thought it was a St. Ed's. And they were like, what? It's 30 minutes to get there. But yeah, so I've been doing all of these trails and my next one is in the Mueller neighborhood. But so I'm trying to, get on trend with that one because I'm a little bit behind where I need to be. But that is kind of one of my things to do. But it's really hard because this is one thing I need to work on is I need to get hobbies. So if y'all have recommendations, let me know.
Okay, but the hobbies are not relaxing.
I know.
Hobbies are another thing to do.
Okay, relaxing. What do I do to relax? Oh, and well, let me tell you, when I love to eat, and part of my favorite spots to go for good barbecue, which is now a Michelin designated barbecue spot, is Leroy and Lewis Barbecue in District 2. It is a must.
Good plug.
There you go.
All right. Eat barbecue to relax,
Yes.
everyone. Okay. Well, is there anything that you want to add that I didn't ask you about when it comes to what you do?
I mean, I think the biggest thing right now is just recognizing that this budget, it's a big one. I mean, it's unprecedented for us to be in such a big budget deficit. So we're going to have some really tough conversations. And even the consideration of a tax rate election is something I take very seriously, because we have an affordability crisis in our city. And so anytime we're going out and asking people to shoulder more, it's something that we have to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons and because we know that we can deliver. And I know there's a lot going on at the federal level. And so to me, what's really important is that we have a robust community conversation on what that looks like and what people want to see reflected in their city budget. If you want to follow me to learn more about the budget process, check out @Vanessa for ATX.
Mayor Pro Tem, thank you so much for having us here at City Hall, and good luck with that deficit. That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find links to Mayor Pro Tem Fuentes' social media in our show notes. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. Nikki will be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.